Those of you who can see the question that's too small for most of you to see up there on the PowerPoint, is church boring? Well, no, don't answer that. Sometimes the answer to that question is yes, so fast that the proper question is, why is church boring? Growing up, it is no secret that as a young child, sitting for an hour or more, listening to things that you don't care all that much about, can be a little boring. Can we just say that? Can I say that without getting books thrown at me? Now, I love, at my hometown church, there was, every once in a while, the preacher would do what they call flannel board lessons. You'd get a flannel board. This is an old piece of technology, kids. Flannel board, and he would have flannels, and he would lay those out. He'd have a stack of the different flannels that he would use. We loved those. They were still boring, but we loved them because we could watch the sermon end. We had a countdown to when he was done. And so he's almost there. What? We liked that. We didn't have PowerPoint back then. Not that really my PowerPoint helps anyone to know when I'm almost done. But church can be a place sometimes that's a bit stifled of joy. So much so that when something fantastic happens, the instinct is, don't laugh. Have you ever heard anyone tell you a story about how something happened and then they ended it with something hilarious happened and they ended it with, and the worst part was, we were in church, so we couldn't laugh. What? When did church become a place that is so stoic that we aren't allowed to have any positive emotions? I was talking with a guy recently who said the church we were going to, he was talking about some other church, he said the church we were going to, for that, they were all nice and loving and kind and joyful until the hour of worship. And it's just straightforward and no one smile and no one, nothing. Don't even let your eye twitch. In the age of cell phones, it has added a new element of fantasticness to the spontaneity of church. Because sometimes someone's cell phone will go off, and sometimes the song that's completely inappropriate for a church service. This is a true story. It happened in where I was preaching, and a woman's phone went off. And I'm not going to name the song, but it was about what tequila does to someone's clothes. Didn't work with my sermon all that well. But the instinct is, well, pretend that's not happening. Why? Why should we pretend like the things around us aren't going on? Why should we pretend that this is a moment? Well, we got to be solemn. Watch us take communion. It's all here. It's all. There's a moment. It can be miserly if we don't watch it. So to counteract this, or to even preach against it, because I think a joyless church is sin. I think a church that does not celebrate is falling short of what a church is supposed to do. A joyless church, a celebrationless church, is sin. To counteract it this morning, I've got two stories for you. First is about an ark. Actually, it's about the ark of the covenant. See, the Jewish people had, even ever since the time of Moses, they had this box that was very ornate and decorated, and had within it some very important things to their history, or at least to their current history. And Aaron's staff, Ten Commandments, had some very famous, the things that made them the people of God. They walked around with this, and as they were going into battle, as they were going, they would walk with this, and that meant God was with them. The Ark of the Covenant meant God was with them, and when they lost it, it was devastating. So David went about winning the battles. Once David became king, actually before David became king, he went about taking care of the Philistines, taking care of winning the land. And then when he became king, David put his throne in Jerusalem. And the next order of business was, let's go get the ark. Let's go get the Ark of the Covenant. Let the Ark of the Covenant make its way back to our town. Let the Ark of the Covenant let's put God back in our place again. And so they were going to bring the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem. They were going to put up a tent. They were going to put the Ark of the Covenant in there. Because what's more secure than a tent? And on their way back, the first time they went to do it, this is in 2 Samuel 6, the first time they went to do it, they set it in a cart and just dragged it along. And as they were doing that, a guy named Uzzah touched the cart because it hit a bump, touched the Ark of the Covenant in the cart, it hit a bump, he touched it to secure it so it wouldn't fall, and he died. And that can kill a parade very quickly. And so they stopped the parade right there, and there was a guy's house right next to there, so they just left it there. Obed-Edom was the guy's name. They left the ark in his house. Because David was afraid of what God would do. Actually, the scripture says, and David feared the Lord. David was afraid of the Lord, and so he left the house, the Ark of the Covenant, at Obed-Edom. Now, the word comes back to David. Now King David. Can you kill this mic? Every time I walk in front of it, I hear two of me, and that's way too many of me. Now King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has, because of the Ark of God. So, David went to bring up the Ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. So, we're going to try this again. Second time. Go down to Obed-Edom. God has blessed Obed-Edom, and so David takes that as a sign of, all right, we are in favor with God again, and I'm going to go get it. So David went to bring the Ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David, to Jerusalem, with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the Ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. Notice this time they're carrying it. They're doing it the right way. They take 6 steps, they sacrifice a bull of fattened calf. You may have heard they did it every 6 steps. That's not what that says. Just after they'd taken the first 6 steps, they sacrificed, and then they went on. So, wearing a linen ephod, which was a priestly garment here, David is taking the role of the priest. It is like, I am filled with something that my body can't contain. So my joy will be shown in my motions. Have you ever won something big? Or maybe your favorite team has won the Super Bowl. Or maybe you're rooting for Argentina in the World Cup today. Speaking of, guys, I know that's a big deal to you, but it'll be over before church tonight. So please come back. We're going to talk about a difficult teaching of Jesus together. It'll be fantastic. Once the World Cup's over, get ready and come on. I know that's a big deal. I'm just kidding. That's not a big deal to any of you, is it? Just me and you? Okay. I'm excited about it. Yes, there we go, back there. Yeah, that's it. So we have a So a big thing goes on, a big thing happens. Your team wins, or you get good news, or you are just blown away by the joy of a moment. And your body do you jump? Do you jump with people? I've seen basketball teams just jumping at center court. Why are they doing that? They've been jumping all game long. That's because they can't contain the joy inside of them. David is dancing before the Lord because the Lord has brought him joy. Now look what happens. He goes on. He's dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. Let's find out why. Verse 20. Let's skip down to verse 20. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, and as any vulgar fellow would." For Mike, we'll call her Michael, because the correct pronunciation is just difficult for me. Michal, but we're going to say Michael. Michael had this problem with David because she thought this is not how a king should act. Remember, her father was king. This is inappropriate behavior for someone as holy as a king. We should not act like that. He says to her, "It was before the Lord," not before those slave girls, but before the Lord. "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father," inappropriate dig, "or anyone from his house, when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people, Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord." Sometimes our instinct, sometimes we don't sing out. Sometimes we don't cheer. Sometimes we don't dance before the Lord because that's just flat inappropriate. That's not what church should be about. Now, yes, if you're jumping and spinning and skipping, you're probably going to run into somebody. And let's keep that at a minimum. But for us to ever get to the place where the attitude where we say that sort of joy should be frowned upon because it's just flat inappropriate, we become what I call well people. I'll explain it. Well people are people who say this a lot. Well. Or we have this, it's just this frown upon, we're harumping a lot. We don't want to be that sort of people. We want to be the people who say, when I'm before the Lord, I will celebrate the fact that I'm before the Lord. I will not let anyone make me feel like my celebration before God is somehow unworthy of me. God is worthy of my celebration. God is worthy of my joy. God is worthy of my dance. So we will celebrate before the Lord and no one can stop us. If you go to a church that is not celebrating, or if you ever catch us, if you're new to this church, if you ever catch us not celebrating, then let us know. We want our joy to be evident before all. We want our excitement about what God has done to be evident in front of everybody. And if people frown and harump and well and say, well, that's just inappropriate, that's not what exactly we should be doing, it's distracting. This is what we do. I was raised in church where when we sang, no one right here. Now, we would not call that sin, because we really couldn't find Bible to do it. Actually, when we got into the Bible, there was this lift holy hands verse that we really didn't like. Mark through that one. But we didn't like that. And so what we say is, well, it's just distracting. We don't want to call attention to ourselves. It's just distracting. People with massive, colorful hats were saying, it's just distracting. But I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but if you were raised in a church where everyone, while they were singing, were raising their hands, and you came into a church where they weren't, all of us not raising our hands is extremely distracting for those people. It's not distracting because it's bad, it's distracting because it's not what you're used to. We want to celebrate before God. We don't ever want to just deem something inappropriate just because it's not what we're used to. Stop using the Bible, the Word of God, to only validate your actions and make other people's actions sin. We want to celebrate before the Lord. We want other people to feel free to do so as well. I just spent a month and a half at church camp. And one of the things that's difficult that we have to work with those kids about is when they leave church camp, the energy that they feel there, they go into the world and they don't feel it. One of the problems is they go to their home church and they don't feel it. That's really what they mean. They go home. These kids sing with excitement. We baptized two girls this week, and each time when they would get baptized, I'd never heard this before, but they would say, one of the girls' names was Addison. They said, "Goodbye, Addison," as she went under, and when she came up, they said, "Hello, Addison." The old self and the new self being wished away and being said hello to. And then what happened is not a single one of them sat down and said, "Amen." They cheered with all their might. Because who am I to tell the angels in heaven that what they're doing is just a bit too inappropriate for this moment right here? We will celebrate, and I'm going to be honest with you, as Church of Christ, this is something we've got to work on. We need to get better at doing it ourselves, and we need to get better at not judging others when they do. We're going to have to be more comfortable with the celebration that God is having for His lost children coming home. And that's the second story I want to tell you. Lost son. Luke 15, Jesus tells a story about three different things. A lost sheep first, and he says the man left the 99 to go find the one, and he called his friends and said, "Come, rejoice with me." The second story was a woman who found some coins that she was looking for. And she called her friends, or called a friend. Like, when they called, they stepped out the door and said, "Hey, friends." You know, it wasn't this. She let her friends know and said, "Come, rejoice with me." And the last story was a story about a son, a second-born son, a young son, who asked for his inheritance early. Sometimes we make this out to be worse than it is. It actually isn't. That actually was a very common thing. If you were the younger son, you're not getting the land, you're not getting the animals, you're just going to get a cut of money. And he said, can I go start my life earlier? Do I have to wait until you die to go start my life? He got 1/3 of his dad's inheritance. So he runs off to the city and he wastes it. He lives his life a bit too hard and he wastes his money. And he ends up working for a farmer, a pig farmer, a Jewish man. Working for a pig farmer is the worst job you can do. He actually ends up sleeping with with the pigs and wishing to eat what they ate. Then he comes to his senses. He says, when he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father cut him off. He had a whole speech prepared. Cut off the speech. The father said to his servants, 'Quick, hurry, bring the best robe and put it on, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fat calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate.'" Sometimes we think, "Well, I'm just going to come and grovel before God." But God is celebrating our return to Him often more times than we celebrated ourselves. The kingdom of heaven is rejoicing at our return to Him. He runs and meets this son and grabs him, and his son says, "Listen, Dad, let me say what I've got to say." And he says, "Forget that. Go grab a ring. Go grab a cloak. Go grab the fattened calf. Tell everyone to hang the streamers up and let the disco ball come down. We are having a party, and it is going to be good." And the older brother sits outside for this. He says, "For this we're having a party, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again, and he was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. The older brother became angry and refused to go in when he was told. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends." Now, this is overreacting here. "But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." Oftentimes, the reason we don't celebrate, the reason we're not that great at it, is because we don't often celebrate wages. Someone walked up to you and handed you a check for the amount of money you make a week, or the amount of money you make a month, and said, "Here, you don't owe me anything." It would be a day to rejoice. But when the school or your employer or when your employer hands you that check and says, here's what you've earned, you don't go home rejoicing unless it's been one of those months. Most of the time, you just, "Yes, this is what I've earned. There we go. Let's go and make a deposit in the bank. There we go." You don't celebrate your wages. A lot of times we don't celebrate because what we have, we think we've earned. What we have, we think we deserve. We could get into the mindset of believing that what God has given us, we did not deserve, we did not earn, we aren't in some sort of great position now. If we think it was grace, then why not celebrate? It's a surprise that He even found favor in us at all. Why not celebrate? In church, just this hour and 15 that we spend together, all sitting in chairs and singing together and listening and praying and taking communion. In this time, what I hope people see in us is a celebration of what God has done for us. I hope when people come in and think, listen, Not everyone's going to come to the Mineral Springs Church of Christ, but I believe if you have a friend who's looking for a church, I think you are doing them a disservice if you don't tell them you've got to at least come by. You've got to at least come see what this is about. And what I want them to see when they come is people who love each other unconditionally. And people who celebrate the grace and favor of God without end. We want to do that unswervingly. We want to constantly and consistently celebrate what God has done for us. So you want to call this worship, call it worship. You want to call it a celebration, call it a celebration. Because we were lost and now we are found. God was far off and now He has come back. I'm not telling you to do anything that you're uncomfortable with. But what I am asking you to do is to find the joy that you had the day you realized He had done it for you. Find that in everything you do, through prayer, through song, communion, we find joy. Now, y'all are fantastic about being free to smile and laugh, mainly because I'm just a complete idiot. There's also an element where we know that this is a place of joy. This is a place of love. This is a place of grace. And it's in places of joy, in places of grace, that you will find celebration. I hope this week for you, this whole week, Monday through Saturday, is a week of celebrating what God has done for you. You do that for 6 days straight, and on the 7th, you come together with a group of people who have been celebrating all week just like you. Let's see what our worship sounds like. If you've never experienced the celebration, if you've never experienced the beauty of being united with Jesus, if you've never experienced a new life that you can be given freely by the grace of Jesus and by the love of God, if you've never experienced the Spirit that moves us to celebrate, and today's the day to accept that call. To unite yourself in baptism with Jesus. To begin to celebrate with your Father because you have come home. Whatever you need this morning, please come forward.
I will stand.